Welcome to Notes from the North, the official podcast of the Vikings Gazette. On this episode, we were joined by a very special guest, Christopher Gates from Daily Norseman, who is the creator and lead over at their site. And with that being said, we'll throw it over to the interview.
Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
All right, well, we'd like to welcome another guest to Notes from the North. We'd like to welcome Christopher Gates from Daily Norseman here. And Christopher, I guess we're trying to figure out a little bit, how did you find your way to writing about the Vikings?
Well, I mean, it's not like a big romantic story or anything like that. I was just kind of looking around for Vikings information one day, and I just happened to come across a site called Windy City Gridiron, which is the SB Nation site dedicated to the Chicago Bears. And they obviously, since they're an NFC North rival, they talked about the Vikings. And at the time, SB Nation didn't have a Minnesota Vikings blog. They were still pretty young at the time. And so I took a shot and asked if they wanted somebody that was interested in doing up a Vikings site for them, and sent them some writing samples. And I'm still doing it. They haven't fired me yet, so must have done something correctly.
So far, so good.
Yes, sir.
That's I didn't realize, because I just interviewed Mr. Wiltfong from Windy City Gridiron, because I've been going around to NFC North writers, and I've finally come around to Vikings and looking to get a Vikings perspective other than my own, which is what led to me reaching out to you. So that's interesting. So Daily Norseman, you didn't start that and then kind of migrated over to SB Nation. It started brand new in SB Nation.
Yeah, it's always been an SB Nation site. I mean, the way SB Nation did things is they got all of the Major League Baseball teams first, and then they had like a couple of blogs for some of the NFL teams and some NHL teams and whatnot. And, they just eventually expanded to the network that they are now of like 300 plus different sites covering pretty much everything you can imagine. I think because when we hit 300 sites, they sent us a list of what chronological order the sites were added to the network, and I think we were at like number 60 out of 300. So we were one of the earlier NFL blogs on the network, and we were. I shouldn't say we, because at the time it was just me. I was motivated to do that just by reading some of the other SB Nation sites and hoping that I could contribute my thoughts on our favorite team to the network.
Right. So, I mean, was this like when you started Daily Norseman? I mean, what year would that have been?
That was our first post came in July of 2006. So a couple of weeks before training camp this year. So we basically gotten the Brad Childress era, the Leslie Frazier era, and now the Mike Zimmer era. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 2006. So this is 15 years next month that the site's been online.
And would you have guessed that this was where things would have gone after about 15 years?
Absolutely not. I mean, you don't start something like this, with the aspirations of, you're going to have thousands of people reading you and whatnot. I mean, some people might, but, it's just something I enjoy doing. I enjoy writing. I enjoy Vikings football. And, it's just nice to be able to do those. And the fact that it's generated the kind of audience that it has is just kind of gravy for the most part.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I was talking to Sam last night about Daily Norseman, and I'm not in any way being insincere when I say this, but I was just saying that I just think it's such an excellent site. And I started the Vikings Gazette less than a year ago. Actually, in July, it'll be 1 year for me with the Vikings Gazette. And I was just saying that Daily Norseman is just a site that I admire. Like it's just I just was saying they just do excellent work. Because Sam actually, if I don't know if this will offend you or not, but he actually leans towards Green Bay, truthfully. And so I was keeping him up to date on all things Vikings.
That's okay. We all have our faults.
Yeah,
exactly. That's something we can.
Right.
That's something we can handle.
Right. Okay.
But, I mean, I think we might be the oldest Vikings blog that's still been kind of continuously running this whole time. We did have a couple of inspirations. There was a site that used to be out there It was called Mr. Cheer or Die's Viking Underground. So that was he was kind of the godfather of Vikings blogs. And then one day his site just kind of disappeared. It was on one of the servers at the University of Minnesota, but he had been doing it for like forever before our site came along. And I don't think we had much of an overlap because I think his site disappeared not long after we got going. But yeah, I certainly didn't expect this to last 15 years, but it's been pretty great. There's been ups, there's been downs, and it's all been, fun to cover.
Fair enough. I mean, the final question I have for you before we maybe get into the Vikings and OTAs on roster is, I mean, how much different was it in 2006, launching this site, just hopping on, writing about the Vikings? Was it different than it is now in the sense of, I'm thinking in terms of competition or whatever the case may be? What was it like 15 years ago?
I mean, the competition, I can't remember how many other Viking sites there were out there. Most of them were on like Blogspot or Blogger or something like that. There weren't any like big, networks that kind of did this sort of thing. It was a whole lot different because social media wasn't nearly as big as it was now, or as it is now.
Right.
There was no real Facebook. There was no Twitter. Basically, if you wanted to cover something, you had to wait for like the Star Tribune website or the Pioneer Press website or ESPN to update so that you'd have something to talk about. And now you just kind of sit and watch Twitter scroll through and somebody says something, you're like, hey, there's something to write about. Awesome. But it was way different doing it back then than it is now, because just the volume of information you have available today is just so much greater than it used to be. I appreciate it, but things are a whole lot different now than they were when we first got started.
True enough. That's all making sense. Sam, do you have anything before we hit second down here?
No, it's really cool. It's really neat to hear, and I think just like we've grown up and following different teams, and the way that we access teams is certainly different as a fan, and so it makes sense that covering it, that things would be different. So no, it's neat. But we want to transition to second down and look a little bit at the state of where the current Vikings roster is at now. And I guess like as a general question, just to start this off, I feel like right now we're the spot in the summer where we're just like so desperate for football, and we got the OTAs on right now. And like, how much do you feel like we can actually read into what's happening at OTAs?
I don't think there's a whole lot that you can really glean from OTA practices. You'll see like we just talked about with social media, like the team official Twitter accounts or whatever will put together these highlight reels of dudes in shorts and t-shirts making one-handed catches, and everyone gets hyped up because that's the point. That's what they're supposed to do. But I really don't think you can read a whole lot into what's going on in shorts and t-shirts in the middle of June. Especially for when a lot of the guys that you're the most interested in are, for the Vikings, guys like Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis. You can get no feel for what the offensive line is doing during OTAs pretty much. You see like catches and runs and interceptions and stuff like that. So I think there's only so much you can get from OTAs. Like you said, we're just desperate for football at this point because it's been like 4 months since the last time a meaningful football game took place. And I think we get excited over stuff, but just because you get excited about it doesn't mean there's any real information that you can get from what's going on out there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was laughing with Kyle last night just because there was a clip that they had put on the Vikings Twitter account where they highlighted Thielen making this catch, and I was like, I can't tell if that was actually a good throw or if it bounced off the cornerback's hands or what even happened, because it's some dude on their phone recording this thing, and so it feels like I fall into this where I want football, I want to watch something meaningful, but I think that's wise to not read too much into this.
Yeah, you can only watch so many like highlight films and hype videos and stuff like that, and eventually you just want the football. And like we said, as nice as it is to have these things from OTAs and whatnot, we're not really going to learn anything until the actual training camps start. And then again, we can't really. I mean, the shortened preseason now. I'm not sure how much we're going to get from the preseason either, but I think you can get significantly more from training camp practices and training camp highlights than you can from OTAs and whatnot right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, before you mentioned Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis, and those are two names that, I mean, any Vikings fan, of course, is, I think, thrilled that we chose them, especially where we chose them, and the potential that they represent for us, to maybe at least get to some level of competence. I don't necessarily think we'll have an elite offensive line. The question I have for you, though, I mean, when we talk about this roster, and I agree with everything you're saying with OTAs, like it's just, especially with the big fellas, the linemen, it's really tough to glean anything meaningful at all. But I mean, are you feeling hopeful? Have they done enough to address the offensive line, do you think?
I think so. I mean, I like the guys that they have now. I mean, people talk about how Rick Spielman ignores the offensive line and whatnot, but if you look at the guys who are going to be starting, at least the guys that should be starting, all 5 of their starters for this year are going to be guys that were taken in the first 3 rounds. You're going to have 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, and assuming that Wyatt Davis wins the right guard job, if he should, you'd have a 3rd-rounder on there too. And that's not ignoring the offensive line. It's a matter of the Vikings coaching staff coaching these guys up to the level of potential that got them selected at the points they were selected, so that they can be, this offensive line doesn't have to be like the Cowboys of the 90s or anything like that for this offense to put up points with the skill position talent that it has. They just have to be not actively awful like all the time. And I definitely think that we can get there. They have guys like Rashad Hill, who probably isn't starting material, but he's a pretty solid backup if it comes down to needing to use him. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the depth comes from. But at least as far as the starters go, I'm pretty optimistic about what this offensive line can accomplish. And it's been a long time since we've been able to say that, I think.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of criticism from Vikings fans about the offensive line because it's been either average to below average for such a long time. But I think what you're saying is exactly true. I mean, it's a philosophical decision in a sense. I mean, it's not that they haven't addressed the offensive line. They have. It's that they've addressed it through the draft with young talent. It's not that they're going out and signing big time free agents for huge deals. So it's just about how they've gone about it. And if anything, it would seem to me, without actually being in the building, that maybe more of the criticism ought to go toward the coaching staff in a sense, in that they're the ones who are kind of entrusted with developing and pushing these players. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think I can agree with that. I mean, because, like you said, they haven't signed a lot of big name free agents on the offensive line. I mean, you look at a guy like Pat Elflein, who everyone thought was a great pick in the 3rd round a few years ago, and had a pretty decent job starting as a rookie. And, then he got hurt in the NFC Championship game and took a while to recover and just never quite got back to the form that he had in his rookie season. So, I mean, I don't know if, that's on him or if that's on the coaching staff, but, a lot of the guys that they've taken flyers on, you have guys like Oli Udo that people seem to like a lot and doesn't really get on the field ever. So, I mean, obviously the coaches see more in practice every day than what we see, but they've spent premium picks on guys. If you consider 1st and 2nd day selections, premium picks, it's a matter of guys like Rick Dennison and the rest of the offensive line coaching staff getting these guys up to the level of performance that we anticipated when they were drafted that high.
Right, fair enough. And I mean, this is maybe is another. I'm sure you've seen this in your travels as well, if you peruse comment sections at all. When I think of the Vikings offense, do they need a better wide receiver 3? Would that make life easier for everybody in that there's another legit option for Cousins? Or are you a BC Johnson, Chad Beebe fan?
See, that was kind of the debate when, the Vikings were going through the draft and, you look at the wide receiver depth chart. Obviously, Thielen and Jefferson are as good a duo as there are in the league. Yes. And then, like you said, it kind of drops off to the BC Johnson, Chad Beebe level. But if you look at the kind of offense that Mike Zimmer wants to run, I believe, I'd have to look it up to be 100% sure, but I believe the Vikings used 3 wide receiver sets less than any team in the league last year. I think that's been the case for the last couple of years. And so I think wide receiver 3, while it could use an upgrade, I don't know how essential that is, or if you'd have to go out and get like a premium guy, because if you're only going to go 3 wide receivers like 25% of the time, that's kind of a waste, especially if you're playing multiple tight ends. I'm kind of excited to see what Irv Smith and Tyler Conklin can do as the top 2 tight ends now that Kyle Rudolph has moved on. But I think I would be more tempted to look for an upgrade at the tight end spot than I would be for wide receiver 3, just because of the style of offense that the Vikings run just has that much more emphasis on multiple tight end sets rather than trying to spread teams out offensively and whatnot.
Interesting. So would that be more so an upgrade over Tyler Conklin as the tight end too, or are you thinking with Irv Smith?
I think Irv Smith is going to have a really solid year this year. I think it would be more of a tight end 2 upgrade over Tyler Conklin, although when Conklin got his opportunity last year when Rudolph was hurt, he did a pretty solid job too. So it's going to be interesting to see what those 2 guys can do now that they're the top 2 primary guys and Kyle Rudolph isn't eating into their snaps anymore.
Right. I mean, what you're saying there in terms of, it got me thinking as well about, I mean, the Vikings were active in free agency, more active than I had anticipated. In you mentioning, the possibility of upgrading a tight end too is what got me thinking about that. But if we could transition a little bit in the sense of, like, when you think about the moves they made in the offseason, it's primarily on defense. Do you think that those moves were, well, one, good moves? I'm thinking Dalvin Tomlinson and Patrick Peterson, obviously, but then there's a few others as well. Breeland more recently. And, is it enough to actually get that defense back, do you think?
I think the Vikings have done a lot of things on the defensive side of the ball to get themselves at least close to where Mike Zimmer wants to be again. If you just look at the experience at the cornerback spot, I mean, going into last year, I mean, there were like no cornerbacks on the roster that had any real starting experience. I mean, Mike Hughes had a handful of starts, and really that was it, because you had the young guys like Gladney and Dantzler and Chris Jones and some of the other younger cornerbacks and whatnot. And now you're bringing in guys like Patrick Peterson, who's been in the league for 10 years, and Bashaud Breeland's been in the league for 7 or 8 years, and Dantzler has a year under his belt, and they're trying to do. Oh, and they brought back Mackenzie Alexander, which I think was incredibly underrated as well. I think that guy's pretty solid. So they have a whole lot more experience at the cornerback spot now, which I think can only help, especially if Dantzler can actually stay healthy and stay on the field. He can learn a lot from guys like Breeland and Peterson and Mackenzie Alexander. And you look at what else they did on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, they were missing Anthony Barr for most of the year last year. I think everyone kind of expected him to be gone this year with his salary, but the Vikings did what they do and brought him back. And Eric Kendricks missed the last 4 or 5 games last year, I think. And, they get Michael Pierce back after he opted out. And hopefully, fingers crossed, and I know we're going to get to this here eventually, Danielle Hunter finally, comes back and helps to cement the defensive line. But, the Vikings have done a lot. They've added a lot of talent at pretty much every level of the defense. And hopefully that will translate into us seeing the kind of Vikings defense we become accustomed to over the Mike Zimmer era.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned Breeland. I personally was surprised to see. I thought that it was going to be a 1-year deal just so late in the offseason. But I was surprised that it went for $4 million. Do you think Breeland is now the front runner for the starting spot opposite Patrick Peterson? Or do you think Dantzler still has the upper hand when it comes to the second outside corner spot?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure how well Breeland performs as like a slot corner. I think Peterson and Dantzler are more outside guys, but I think Breeland has some ability in the slot. But then again, that's what they signed Mackenzie Alexander for as well. Right. In any case, like we said, Dantzler has already had issues staying healthy. staying on the field. And, we've seen, and particularly we saw it last year at just about every position, depth is important. And, whether it's Breland as the primary starter and Gladney getting an opportunity or not Gladney, I don't think Gladney's going to be here for obvious reasons, but Dantzler gets an opportunity to develop a little more and whatnot. You're just going to have that depth and that ability to kind of do things in waves, or like we said, if somebody gets injured, you have someone with some experience that can step in and fill the spot. So I'm not sure that's probably going to end up being one of the more interesting battles of training camp, because we know Peterson's locked in at one corner, but yeah, we're going to have to see how they work with Breland and Dantzler and Alexander and the rest of the guys they brought in now.
Right, exactly. I think that's going to be a fascinating camp battle. So I'm intrigued, and that's one of those ones where OTAs just really doesn't do it justice. Sam, what do you think? You got any questions, man?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know talked a little bit about the offseason. I don't know, do you have a favorite move that the Vikings made this offseason?
I think I'm probably going to have to go with the Patrick Peterson signing. I mean, I like the Dalvin Tomlinson move, but like we said, the Vikings secondary was just so young last year, especially at the cornerback spot. And, Patrick Peterson has seen just about everything there is to see in the NFL, and he can help those young guys, see things from a perspective that they probably haven't gained yet from not having any real experience out there. And so I think, if he can, I mean, he's not bad or anything like that. Obviously, he's still a very good corner. I don't know if he's quite, he's past his peak, obviously, given his age and whatnot. But if he can regain some of that and do that in addition to helping the Vikings young corners develop, I think it's going to be a really solid signing, even if it is only a 1 year sort of deal for him. So I think I would have to say the Patrick Peterson signing was my favorite move of the offseason for the Vikings, at least as it relates to free agency and whatnot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I would agree. It's definitely a name. It's a big name, and there's a significant, I know it's 1 year deal, but there's significant money that was allocated there. I know I was scrolling through Twitter a couple of days ago, and Sean Borman tweeted just the numbers that the Vikings have spent in free agency on the offensive side versus the defensive side. And the defensive side is over 42, just over 42 million, and the offense is just under 4.5 million. So there's definitely a significant focus of this offseason.
Last year was the first time in the Zimmer era where the team really had to lean on its offense.
Yeah.
I mean, for most of the Mike Zimmer era, the defense was bad the first year he was there, just because, that was what he inherited. But basically every year after that, the defense was really good, and they were kind of carrying the offense for the most part. And yeah, last season, the defense kind of fell apart, whether because of, losing guys like Linval Joseph and Xavier Rhodes and players that had been here for a while, or, injuries like we saw with Kendricks and Barr and some other players. But yeah, last season, the offense was expected to carry the defense, and some games they were able to do it, and some games they just couldn't handle that much because the defense just didn't stop anyone. But yeah, they knew where the money needed to be spent, and I'm sure Mike Zimmer was pounding the table for as many defensive guys as they could get their hands on. So yeah, they did what they had to do, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like he definitely had a voice in some of the decisions that were made this offseason.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is good. I think it's important. It's you want for if you're gonna have a coach and you're gonna pay him money and you're gonna have him there, then surround him with a team that makes sense for what he's looking to do. But I know we're talking about defense, and so I think that this is a natural transition to talking in our third down about Danielle Hunter. And I guess there's a lot of speculation right now. We're in OTAs. What would you say your level of concern is when it comes to Hunter?
I'm mildly concerned. I can understand where he's coming from. He signed that contract a few years ago, and now compared to some of the other edge defenders, he's not quite as highly paid as some of those guys are. And on the other hand, he's coming off a significant injury. Neck injuries are nothing to screw with. And so, it's difficult for the Vikings to say, yeah, you just missed a whole year with a significant injury. We're going to give you more money. And so, I mean, hopefully something will come about where, the two sides can work something out and he can be in camp and doing what he does again, especially after he missed last season. But yeah, I'm mildly concerned at this point. If we get to training camp and he hasn't shown up, then the concern level goes significantly higher. But yeah, now I'm mildly concerned about whether or not he's going to be back.
Right. It's, when I've been thinking about this, I've been going back and forth. I feel like the two situations that we've dealt with recently that have been similar in a sense have been Stephon Diggs and Dalvin Cook, in that they're two young, tremendous players. Stephon Diggs ends up getting traded, obviously. Dalvin Cook, there were some rumblings of being upset and maybe staying away a little bit, and then they iron out that contract extension. I mean, do you think if we have General Manager Gates, or maybe Rick Spielman has you on speed dial? I don't know. Spielman calls you up and said, "Listen, this job is just getting to be too stressful. Like, I'm putting it on you. What do we do here to solve this problem to make sure that we have a Dalvin Cook situation and not a Stephon Diggs situation?"
I mean, they do have some extra cap space freed up now, thanks to the Rudolph release having been designated post June 1st. They might be able to work something out where they can get him a little extra money or whatever, if that's really what he's after to make him happy. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to look at guys like Brian O'Neill's going to be up for an extension here too.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to give them too much more, I would think, because like I said, he's coming off a significant injury, and you don't know if he's back 100% yet. You don't know his situation because you haven't seen him play since the playoff game against the Niners in like that almost 2 years ago. So it's going to be difficult. I mean, I would like to think that they could find something to make him happy with, but we're just going to have to see what Rick Spielman and Rob Brzezinski and company can pull off here.
Do you think that would be? I mean, because I see a lot of Vikings fans. They say, well, there's the neck injury, which obviously is a massive deal because you say, this is a super serious injury. This isn't like spraining your ankle. And then there's 3 years left on his deal, right? And so on the one hand, you say, okay, the Vikings have the leverage. But then the other hand, you say, okay, how was your pass rush last year? Not very good. And you traded for another young stud defensive end in Ngakoue. Well, how did that work out for you? So it's not as simple as just getting another edge rusher. Not every edge rusher fits and does the things that Andre Patterson and Zim want them to do. And so do you think, though, that in a sense that Hunter actually has a fair amount of leverage here?
I think he does, because like you said, last year the Vikings pass rush was just a disaster without him. I mean, you want to like guys like, DJ Wanham and whatnot, but, Danielle Hunter is Danielle Hunter, basically. Yeah. And, he's one of the best edge players in football, especially at the young age he's at. He does have a significant amount of leverage here, but, so do the Vikings. So it's just a matter of which way you lean towards as to who actually has the advantage here. And that's something the front office is going to have to work out, and hopefully one way or another it gets done in a manner that keeps Hunter here in purple for the long term.
If disaster strikes and Hunter isn't in purple, or he somehow ends up in Ravens purple like Ngakoue did, do you think that's disastrous for the defense, or will this defense be good enough to get back to being that top tier level like we were just talking about?
I mean, it certainly doesn't help. I know they drafted a couple of guys as edge defenders in Patrick Jones and Janarius Robinson, but, unless one of those guys steps in and has an immediate impact, not having Danielle Hunter, you're going to see the same kind of anemic pass rush, I think, that you saw last year. Obviously, the push from Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson on the inside would help that a little bit, because the Vikings defensive tackles last year were awful.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I think I don't know if they can overcome not having Danielle Hunter there this year. I think they have to have him if this defense wants to be successful.
Right. Right. Are you a Wanham fan? Do you expect considerable growth from DJ Wanham?
I mean, I would like to think so. I mean, he did do a solid job last year for a guy who was drafted in the 4th round, and there probably wasn't much expected out of him.
Yeah.
I don't have his numbers right in front of me or anything, but he did a solid enough job, I think. And as long as Andre Patterson is coaching defensive linemen in Minnesota, I think he can develop just about anyone with some talent into something significant. So, yeah, I think that he would work well as a situational guy. At this point, I don't know if he's ready for the full-time gig as a defensive end. But yeah, I would expect him to take a bit of a step forward this year.
Yeah, true enough. Sam and I, we've talked like the last year in a lot of ways, the Vikings didn't have bad players. They had bad roles. They had guys who were playing roles that they really weren't meant to play that year, right? DJ Warner shouldn't have been playing as much. It's not that he's a bad player. It's just that he wasn't meant for that role necessarily. And then when you do that all over your defense, it really catches up with you. So, I mean, having that true number one defensive end, I guess, allows some of those roles to kind of sort themselves out a little bit. So I think that makes sense. Sam, I have an impossible question for Chris, but before I get there, what do you got?
Yeah, well, I'm curious to see your impossible question now. I guess for me, I've been looking at this offseason, and I guess I feel hesitant about this idea of extending a player that is coming off injury or to like give him what his demands are. I feel like with all the void years they put into some of these contracts, and it's funny, Kyle and I have talked about it a few times, just how concerned people were at the start of the summer about where the money was going to come from. And now, not that there's ever too much money, but it almost feels a little bit like they've opened themselves up to where obviously there's still players they could sign, but now they have this money that Danielle Hunter's looking at. And it's like, well, you got that money. Like you could pay me with that. Like, I guess for me, it sounds like obviously the desire is to get him on the field, and you want Danielle Hunter in your defense every day of the week. But for me, I guess it's not as much a question as just it is like an observation that maybe you can speak into. Just like I'm concerned about the way that money's been spent a little bit in this offseason, especially as you think about looking forward. And I could see an extension or whatever they do to rearrange his contract to be a real blow to this team when you look further down the line.
It could potentially be. I mean, some of the understanding, I think, is that the cap is going to go way up next year. I thought I saw reports of somewhere between $20 and $25 million worth of increase on the cap for next year. So I don't know if that would figure into their calculations in extending guys like Hunter or Brian O'Neill or whoever else it might be. But yeah, you don't want them to, shoot themselves in the foot too much with this. But, like we talked about earlier, without Danielle Hunter, we saw what the defensive line for the Vikings looked like. And, even though he is coming off of a serious injury, if he's all the way back, you can make the case that he single-handedly makes that defensive line formidable again, especially with the additions of Pierce and Tomlinson in the middle. So it's going to be an interesting chess match to watch between Hunter's camp and the Vikings front office here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like the ideal situation is he comes back, everyone's happy, and he picks up where he left off. And so I say my point just in the sense that there is definitely another side to consider. And when you look ahead and you look at what Kirk Cousins' contract's going to be next year and all these void years that have really I think that many times sports teams are in win now or thinking about now, and maybe someone else will have to come and clean up the mess if it gets too bad. But yeah, I think obviously the hope is that this gets done, that everyone's happy and that this defense becomes back to what it should be and what it could be.
I certainly hope so because I like watching Danielle Hunter work, and the way the defense looks with him is significantly better than the way it looked without him. So yeah, hopefully things can get worked out to everyone's satisfaction here before too much longer.
Yeah, that defense was tough to watch, especially near
Yeah,
the end of last year.
Christmas Day was miserable.
it was.
Had
That
a
was awful.
miserable Christmas Day. Yeah. Before I hit you with the impossible question, I'll hit you with a simpler one. So I've spoken with a writer, so Mr. Reisman and Wiltfong and Mr. Brettel. So Packers, Bears, and Lions writer. And the final question I had for them was all, give me an NFC North prediction. And every single one of them chose the Packers. So now, before I ask you my impossible question, I ask you this one. Can you give me an NFC North prediction? Is it the Packers, or are you going with somebody else?
It depends entirely on the Aaron Rodgers situation.
Okay.
If Rodgers is back with Green Bay, then I think you'd have to go with the Packers as the favorite there.
Yep.
Obviously, if Rodgers isn't back, then yeah, I think Minnesota is positioned to jump up and take that spot. But yeah, obviously, when you have a player the caliber of Aaron Rodgers, who just won his third MVP award, and you're not sure whether or not he's coming back, if he comes back, yeah, he's good enough to shift the balance of this division all by himself. So if Rodgers is back, yeah, it's Green Bay. But if he's not back, no, the Vikings win this division if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback in Green Bay, I think.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I don't know, and you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting you here, but I'm going to claim that as a half vote from Minnesota. I had all these 3 full votes for the Packers, and if anybody asks, I'm going to say I spoke with Christopher Gates. Rick Spielman even has him on speed dial, and he said that it's kind of up in the air and half. Maybe Minnesota wins it if everything breaks right.
Fair enough. You can do that. You can put me down for half a Minnesota vote. We got to represent somehow.
We've got audio proof now.
Yeah, right.
That's fine.
Right.
Totally cool.
All right. Well, I'll hit you with my my final question for you, and this is the impossible one. Let's assume everything goes right. Hunter's back, and it doesn't cost, an incredible amount of money. I was going to say it doesn't cost $1 million, but in the NFL, that's not very much. It doesn't cost far more than $1 million. Dalvin Tomlinson ends up being a good 3 technique. Patrick Peterson ends up doing a Terrence Newman style thing and ends up being actually really excellent, even though he's older. Kirk Cousins maybe even takes a step forward with Little Coob. Does this, if everything goes right, is this a legit Super Bowl contender? Could you actually foresee an actual legit shot at the Super Bowl here with these guys?
I actually kind of do, just because this team has as much talent at the skill positions as any other team in the league, with Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Cousins takes a lot of heat. He's not a bad quarterback. He has moments where he makes you wonder what the heck he's doing, but overall, he's not a bad quarterback. Yeah. If the offensive line, like we said earlier, can take a step forward to even being average, this team would be able to put up points in bunches, which is what you need to do to be successful in the NFL. And if you can put up points in bunches like that, it takes kind of the burden off your defense a little bit. And so I think this team has the talent to be a Super Bowl contender. It's just a matter of everything falling into place. And regardless of what team you are in the National Football League, if you're going to win a Super Bowl, you need to get a few bounces, have a few things work in your direction. And yeah, if the Vikings can get some of those bounces, I think they have a shot. I don't know if it's a good shot, but I think they have a shot.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? And at the end of the day, you can really only ask for a chance in life. So
Yep.
if as long as they've got a shot, then I can make my peace with that. Sam, do you have anything for Chris here? That I asked him my impossible question, and he handled it with great grace and poise.
Oh yeah, I think that was exactly the answer you wanted to hear. Yeah,
better than a flat no.
Exactly. Yeah, that would have been discouraging.
Yeah.
Before we end, the question probably fit more in the first down, but it came to me later. I wanted to know, in your 15 years of covering the Vikings, what's been the highlight?
That's a good question.
Wow. I mean, there were the couple of NFC Championship game runs. I mean, obviously they both ended in incredible disappointment, but they were a lot of fun to cover, both the 2009 team and the 2017 team. We obviously had the weirdness of the 2010 season where things just kept getting weirder week after week after week. That doesn't mean it was fun. It was interesting, but it wasn't, a ton of fun. But those runs to the NFC Championship game, I think were probably the highlights, even if they did end badly, because, it's always more fun when your team is successful. And, they were very successful both of those years. And that made it a whole lot of fun, and the community was more active and stuff like that. So, that would probably have to be my answer. Either of those runs to the NFC Championship game, they were both kind of on an equal level, as far as I can tell.
Neat. I feel like with sports, sometimes you have to remember those kinds of moments because it's just so hard for people to actually endure a lot of success as a fan of a team because it's so often a letdown from what you're hoping. And so,
and I mean, and to go, we had those good seasons, and then we had seasons like 2011 where they won 3 games, and 2013 was a pretty awful year, and we have awful years, we have good years, and it just kind of ebbs and flows, and that's what makes this such an interesting thing to do, and bring fans together to either celebrate it or commiserate together.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully more of the former than the latter, but
that would be nice. Yeah.
As it goes. Anyways, we just want to sincerely thank you for stopping by Notes from the North to offer us this insight. And so listeners can find Christopher's work at the Daily Norseman and on Twitter at Daily Norseman. Do you have a personal Twitter account, or is the site account the best spot for social media for you?
The site account is the best spot to get all the stuff from both me and the other writers on the website as well.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely encourage people to go and check out the site. There are lots of good work. And so, this is it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, folks. I appreciate it.
Well, we want to thank Christopher again for coming on. A lot of fun to have him on and to hear his take and just to get a sense of where he's at. I think that it's easy to get caught up in a lot of what's going on right now and trying to check in on the noise and see where people are at. But I know I personally really appreciated his level head and thinking about stuff and enjoyed hearing him talk about the Hunter situation and where we're at.
I'm in full agreement. And I wasn't just saying this because I was talking to him. Like, I really do think that Daily Norseman is an excellent Minnesota Vikings site, and that folks, if you're listening to this and I don't know how many folks, like, if the Vikings, that's your primary Viking spot, I think it's great, man. Hop over to Daily Norseman as well. Like, they just do really excellent work. And so by all means, read their stuff as well. And I thought that he, like you're saying, level-headed approach. Sometimes Vikings fans, especially once we get collectively online, we sometimes can, catastrophize, perhaps might be the word.
Yep.
But I think he brought us a good perspective, which I appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's good. We're things are moving. We're coming to the start of the season, but this has been. It was good just to chat and just to think, and I definitely feel more at peace after that. Just transitioning into our odds and ends, just briefly. I know the Wild season's done. One highlight: Marco Rossi's been back skating, which has been great because he's been dealing with COVID effects, and to see him out on the ice and skating and is definitely encouraging. And so, who knows what his recovery? Wish him all the best and as he's recovering, but. That is exciting. I know we did do some playoff predictions, and mine didn't end well. I like it's been over a week now, and I'm still mourning the loss of the Leafs. I do have my backup pick where I said that the winner that's coming out of the Wild's division will win the cup, and so that gives me a lot of range, but I am feeling pretty good about Colorado or Vegas. At the time we're recording right now, it's 3-2 in the series. That there's still some. The winner will be decided by the time this is released. But either one of those teams is gonna roll Montreal. Although not roll them as much as I thought the Leafs was going to win, but I think that they'll come out on top. And I know Kyle had the Lightning, and they are looking very, very good.
They're an absolute juggernaut. They're deep. They got elite talent, but they're deep. They can play, I think, any style. There's really no clear. Sam knows more about hockey than I do, but to my mind, I don't see any weakness in Tampa. That doesn't mean they can't be beat. Like teams, any team can be beat. The 18-0 Patriots lost, but Tampa just doesn't have a weakness. And so maybe a team gets them here. I don't know. A lot can happen in a 7-game series, but man, oh man, Tampa's good. They're just so good.
They can win many ways. I was listening to someone today. They were talking about like they can win 6-5 and they can win 2-1, and exactly. They've got so many pieces in place. They've done a great job drafting and developing. And this is part of building a team. You gotta, they've hit on some late picks. They've signed good contracts. They've managed things well. And here they are. And so I think
they've won before, right? And so they're as confident as could be, right?
Yeah, they are looking very, very good. I think the best thing for hockey would be for the Lightning and then one of Colorado or Vegas to be in the finals. That would be must-watch hockey.
Tampa, Colorado. Especially if you want to, people in Canada for the most part know how great of a sport hockey is. It does still seem like in a lot of parts of the States, it's a bit of an afterthought. But if you really want to market the sport and say, look at the talent we have to offer, like look at this product, man, Tampa, Colorado, that's tremendous.
And even if it was Vegas, I still think that would be fantastic hockey. Right now, Montreal has just been very much playing not trap, but like just a defensive style of playing, and the New York Islanders to an extent do that as well. And I know they're in their series with Boston right now. That's 3-2 for the New York Islanders as we currently record.
It's really smart. Montreal's not as talented as other teams, so they grind, right? And same thing with New York Islanders, the Barry Trotz as the head coach. It's smart, man. It's really smart.
And their series with Boston actually has been relatively open considering where things are. But yeah, it's just been. I think that a lot of the times for the NHL playoffs, you get these series that are duds, and I think that the Montreal Winnipeg one was a little bit of a dud, but the other 3 series this second round have been incredible, and so it's a lot of fun. And I'm hoping that we continue to get some great matchups.
We didn't talk about this, but let's. And by the time it comes out Monday, there's no suspense. People will know. But we're recording this Wednesday evening. What's your prediction for the final 2 series here? Who's going to end up winning?
Between Boston and the Islanders.
Boston and the Island, and then we get Vegas and Colorado are still going.
Before the series, I would have picked Boston and Colorado. They're both down 3-2 now. I don't know if both can come back, but I'm gonna take them anyways. I'm gonna say Boston.
Oh, come on,
Boston, Colorado.
That's exactly. I was thinking. I'm still sticking with Boston, Colorado. So I feel bad that we're.
You know what? I don't. I'm not gonna change this because of what you said. I got to go first. But
right. All right. Well, I picked the other 2 then. I guess
you got Vegas and the New York Islanders, the favorites actually at this point. That worked out pretty well for you.
I guess so.
You know what? Any one of those teams will be a lot of fun to watch, and I think even the Islanders will be good hockey. So lots of fun, but lots of hockey to come. But we'll wrap it up there. Stay tuned. We've got a couple fun episodes coming. We're going to do some lists. We're definitely in the spot in the off season where there's a little bit less content. We're going to be taking a little bit of a break, but we're going to be recording some episodes and doing some fun lists, some questions. We're going to have Kyle and another guest on to talk about some of their happy memories, maybe some of their not so happy memories, different things, Vikings related, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So check out for those 2 next episodes. They'll be coming out every other week like we've been doing. But thanks so much for listening. Be sure to stop by VikingsGazette.com for great Minnesota news. commentary and analysis. The Vikings Gazette can be found on Twitter and Facebook at Vikings Gazette. Take care, everyone, and we will talk with you soon.